Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Jeffrey Love. Thanks for being on the show, Jeff.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Jeff is a real estate and corporate attorney. He's partner at Gibbs Giden, focusing on the areas of real estate law and business corporate law. So Jeff, why don't you give us a little more about, your background and where you're located potentially, and let's dive in.
Sure. I'm located in Center City, Los Angeles. We are a firm of about 40 attorneys practicing real estate, corporate law, construction law. And I've been doing this for about 10 years now. Always wanted to be involved in real estate initially, maybe as a syndicator or developer, went to law school, became an attorney, started advising and helping other investors, developers with their legal needs, and just kind of fell in love with the legal practice and have been doing it ever since.
Nice. So tell me, is there a specialty that you have in the real estate business specifically?
I like to refer to myself kind of jokingly as a dirt lawyer, mainly because I love the kind of reactions I get from people when I say, "You're a dirt lawyer. What do? You do stuff with dirt?" And I said, well, yes, I'm a real estate transactional attorney. So I help developers acquire land and actually entitle it all the way through the construction process, building the property, leasing it out, dealing with the financing, and then eventually holding it or selling it. Recently, I've been helping a lot of new real estate investors and startups as the kind of syndication field has really grown, and more people are realizing what a great asset real estate is, no matter what the asset class is.
For sure. So, and again, I wanted to thank you for your time and just being willing to share your expertise and your experience. But, you and I had talked before the show too, just about the need or the lack of understanding that most of us have about entities and entity structuring and when we need those. And I know you're an expert in this, and so I'd love for us to get into that and potentially answer a lot of questions that the listeners have.
For sure. So what I kind of one of the first questions I normally get as attorney or real estate attorney is, when should I form a business? When should I incorporate? I've invested, with my friend, or I'm investing in this duplex and I want to grow. Am I opening myself up to liability operating as a sole proprietorship? So what I've kind of done is created this I like to call it the 5 W's, your who, what, when, where, and why, as to incorporating your real estate business, so new investors can really understand what the incorporation process is like, and to make sure that they're protecting themselves.
Okay. So now that sounds good, because I know I wondered that at one time, and I know there's listeners as well that wonder, well, should I have an entity right now of some kind? And let's, as far as, in commercial real estate too, let's say, okay, I'm wanting to be a syndicator, an operator, should I have an entity? And then maybe we go through your 5 W's.
Yes, really investors from any size, from call it your mom and pop investing in your first duplex, to your much larger landlord that may have different entities for various different projects. What it really comes down to, and I can explain it more when we get into the why, is liability protection. If there is a risk of a lawsuit or something happening with an investment property, whether it's multifamily, retail, office, just vacant land, by operating as a sole proprietorship or as an individual, you're putting your personal assets at risk. So your home, your cars, your bank accounts, that's at risk if something happens with your investment. So it really is a good idea to take a step back when you're starting out and say, do I need this entity? Do I have the personal assets at risk where I want to protect that if something were to go wrong in my investment?
Makes sense to me. We want to be protected, and we don't want to invest in our own name. That's for sure. Okay, so So who, what, when, where, why. can you take us through a scenario potentially, or us
I
keep
can.
keep diving?
Some of them are a little more involved than others, but you're essentially who we talked about is really anyone that wants to take advantage of the liability protection and the other benefits that an entity, whether a corporation, limited liability company offers. Those are the people that should incorporate. Um, the when is really, again, another simpler of the 5 W's, but before you start signing contracts, purchase agreements, leases with tenants, that's really when you want to incorporate, because the documents that you sign in your own name beforehand, those are going to remain in your own name, even if you were to incorporate later. So you want to sign these documents before you start. I'm sorry, you want to kind of form your entity before you start signing legal documents.
So when we're signing those documents, how should we sign them? Should we say, like, this or Whitney's tool for this entity, or what should that look like?
When you're an individual, just like signing a check, you're signing as you're an individual. Granted, in some cases, if you had formed a DBA or doing business as with your local county, you could sign for that entity. But for the most part, for an entity, when you're signing, say for an LLC, you'd be, if you're the manager of the entity, it'd be entity's name, and then you would sign your name as, and your title would be the manager. Just a little variation, if you corporation versus partnership, LLC, but for the most part, now you have a signature block and you're signing on behalf of that entity rather than your own individual capacity.
Okay. All right. So now where?
Where? That is a good question, one we get a lot. For the most part, you're going to want to form the entity where you're located or where the property is located. It's easier. You're probably more familiar with your state laws. But the most important aspect is going to be money. When you are a foreign entity, everyone likes to talk about Delaware, who has a great business climate, Nevada, Wyoming, those are even Texas, 4 great states that are pro-business and that really give you a benefit when you're forming a company in terms of not taking into account income from other states, being able to remain anonymous. Really like all 4 of those, but what it comes down to is if I were to, I'm in California, so if I were to go form, say, a Delaware LLC today to invest in property in Los Angeles, not only do I have to pay my franchise taxes in Delaware, but I would have to qualify to do business in California because that's where I'm doing business. And now I pay taxes and have to comply with all of California's regulations as well. So I'm filing 2 formation documents, 2 annual reports, 2 sets of taxes. So in that instance, I don't really get the benefits that Delaware or, say, Nevada would offer because I'm subject to California's rules. So I would take the easier approach, form the entity in the state of California.
Okay. I hear of Wyoming entities and Delaware entities often or all the time.
And there's a good reason. Delaware has easily over a million businesses. People form business there every single day, and it is an easy process. For example, California, we still use snail mail to send in some corporate documents. Delaware, you can do everything online. It's quicker. It's easier. They're a pro-business climate. They have a special court system that handles just business disputes. So there's a reason why people like Delaware. Wyoming and Nevada, you can remain anonymous. So if you were a member of this LLC and you didn't want it to become public, those 2 states allow you to remain anonymous. But whereas in California and certain other states do not. So if you're lucky enough to be investing in one of those states or be located in one of those states, by all means, I would use those entities, form those entities in those states. But it is a calculated question. Do I want to form it there if I'm going to be operating somewhere else and having to qualify to do business anyway?
So if we were trying to remain anonymous, that wouldn't do us much good if we had to register in another state anyway. Is that right?
That's right. So Whitney goes, I'm going to buy a property outside of Las Vegas. Amazing deal. I'm going to form my LLC there. Nobody knows it's me. Great. But if you're buying a property in California and you form your Nevada LLC, you can remain anonymous in Nevada, but now you have to qualify that company in California, your name becomes public. So now you've just done double the paperwork and you didn't really get your goal of being anonymous.
All right. So the why.
The why. Different reasons for different entities, as we always get. But first and foremost, this is liability protection. I don't want to put my personal assets at risk. I don't want my home at risk, my kids' college fund, savings. That we've worked hard for, that we want to keep separate. I want to invest in this deal to make money, but at the same time, I want to shield what I've built so far. By forming a corporation, a limited partnership, an LLC, the latter two of which we often use and probably the two most used type of entities for syndications, we want that limited liability protection. Second, we're bringing on investors when we're doing syndications. If I'm a sole proprietorship, an investor is not going to necessarily want to just give me the money. So I also want a way to be able to transfer units in an LLC or partnership interests. So by forming that entity, we create an ease of transferability where I can bring on investors and essentially break up the pie and sell different pieces to different investors.
You mean as an investor, I could do that?
As an investor and a syndicator, if I'm forming the entity, I want to be able to sell a piece to Whitney and sell a piece to John Smith down the street. As an investor, you also may want to invest through an LLC because it gives you another layer of liability protection. So as an example, someone is at a party at an apartment building you own. Horrible thing happens. They fall over the balcony and they get severely injured. They're going to sue the property owner. They're probably going to sue the tenant and anyone else they can find. So I'm an investor in that deal. My syndicator's done a good job. He's created a layer of liability protection by forming an LLC. So the actual assets of the company aren't at risk. They can't get to me. But if I want to be extra, I've got a lot of assets. I want to be extra careful. I don't want any chance that they're going to sue the members of the company too. And that be myself personally. So I'm going to create another LLC and I'm investing through that LLC. Now they've got two corporate veils that they've got to pierce, and it makes it exceedingly difficult that they'd be able to reach my personal assets.
Okay. So, and I think then you were talking about, as that investor, but I even wanted to mention, as an operator, if I'm investing in my own deals or with, I'm an operator, obviously I'm on the general partnership side, but if I'm also on the limited partnership side, I mean, it would go back to the same thing, right? I mean, I should probably have an entity to invest in that.
It's always recommended because for the limited amount of money and time it creates, it really costs to set it up. It gives you peace of mind. And when you're investing in real estate, we have ups and downs, we have cycles. It's worth it to know that my assets are segregated. And if anything happens, the worst that I'm losing is my investment with this syndicator or as the actual operator and sponsor, that if my investors, something was wrong, if they're going to sue me personally, even as a limited partner, that my assets are protected.
Is there a limit to that? Let's say, like as a passive investor, that maybe I use this entity for 2 deals or to invest in 2 deals passively or 5 deals or would they all have to be in the same state?
No, there's no limit. You can have all your investments in one LLC, or you could create an LLC for each. There really becomes a cost benefit analysis you do where I'm investing a small amount of money in these 2 deals. I don't want to spend whatever the state costs, California, $800 a year in minimum taxes for these deals when I'm investing, say, maybe $5,000 or $10,000 as a limited investor. But if I was investing a much larger sum, I may decide to segregate my investments, especially if there was a unique factor. Maybe one of the properties was an old dry cleaners or car wash, and there was an environmental component to it. I might think that this investment has a little bit extra risk where I don't want to contaminate my other multifamily investments. And I think I run the cost benefit analysis, and I think that the cost of creating a new LLC is outweighed by the benefit I get in that particular circumstance.
Yes. So what about the operator that, or the general partnership ownership that he has? Should he put that in an entity? I mean, it's already in an entity, kind of, but I was just trying to think through that a little bit, owning that ownership under an entity as well.
Absolutely. So as I said, kind of the two entities that we see the most for syndications are limited liability companies and limited partnerships because of the really inherent flexibility of both of those entities to be able to, you know, kind of segregate profits and losses and distribute them in accordance with really the investors and sponsors' desires. But the difference between the two is in a limited partnership, you still have a general partner that's the sponsor running the deal, and they don't have limited liability. So in that circumstance, I'd always recommend that the sponsor creates their own entity to act as the general partner, whether an LLC, an S corp, benefits and cons to both. But that way, if the partnership gets sued, they're protected whether they're a limited partner or the general partner because they do have that kind of entity. You might have heard corporate veil that a claimant would have to pierce to actually get to their assets.
So what about what if it's too late? You know, like we've already been signing as ourselves, you know, for a property or for, you know, whatever it may be. You know, we didn't realize this in time, and we didn't know about Jeff Love, you know, in time, you know, before we started signing those contracts or whatever it may be. What should we do now?
It would depend on the circumstances, but it's best to create an entity sooner rather than later, but it's never too late because you create an entity today, maybe there's a slip and fall or an accident tomorrow. You're protected from that accident going forward. There's also the ability to potentially go back, depending on what the contracts say, and assign those contracts over from Whitney as an individual to Whitney's LLC and remove that personal liability. So as I said, never too late, to protect your assets.
And how long does it take to form an entity?
It can be done in as little as 4 hours, depending on the state. You can pay a rush fee, but as I said, Delaware is even quicker. Delaware, I think you can do it in 2, but it is not a long process. You got your articles, you formed it, and then you can take a little bit longer and do your internal documents to get everything in order.
I was thinking about what if we formed that entity, but then we realized that I did those documents myself, but I probably should have hired an attorney. You know, is there anything we should do there? Should we contemplate forming a new entity, or maybe just having an attorney review the documents from the entity we already have?
I would recommend having them reviewed. There really is no one size fits all, and I do get, as many attorneys do, get clients saying, well, I can form this LLC on LegalZoom, or I can pick up documents at my my neighborhood Office Depot. And for some circumstances that might work, but there really is no one size fits all. Your deal may have a unique aspect based on the property, based on the investors that you're bringing in. Maybe you have foreign investors, and you were thinking about a corporation, and maybe that works for that instance. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you have unaccredited versus accredited investors. So you want to take extra precaution, and when you're forming that entity. So it would always be a good course just to run things by your attorney, make sure that you've set everything up, because I always like to say, I'd rather get everything correct from the get-go than deal with the problems later.
Mm-hmm. Or get it corrected now before the problems come.
Or get it corrected now before the next problem rises up, because you never know with real estate what's going to happen tomorrow, especially dealing with certain types of assets when you're having a lot of comings and goings. You might have construction. You just, problems happen. We want to protect ourselves before they do.
Yeah. Okay. So, as far as, are you a real estate investor as well?
I am. Twofold. I have had a number of clients that have done local syndications where I just kind of fell in love with the property, the deals that they've done, and have asked and been welcome to become an investor in those as well. And I've also invested by myself, mainly in the multifamily aspect. Not quite become a syndicator myself. I'm not quite there yet, but the more individuals that I help makes me just kind of you're to jump on the bandwagon and syndicate my first deal as well.
Cool. Wow. No, that's awesome. Because I like to ask you, especially from your experience working with other operators and also as an investor yourself, I like to ask people, how are you preparing for this potential downturn that everyone's talking about?
It's really making sure that we've analyzed the risk. And like you said, because I've been on both sides of it, I often put on when I'm helping a sponsor, a syndicator put together a deal, I'll put on my investor hat and say, how would I feel about this provision? Would I invest in this deal under these circumstances? So counting for the risk and maybe a potential downturn is making sure that we've protected the client and the investors as much as we can from potential claims, making sure that the client has kind of underwritten the deal as conservatively as they can. Because one of the worst things I've seen many times is a jaded investor where the sponsor has kind of overpromised and underdelivered. That investor feels like they were misled, and now they've got a lawsuit on their hands.
Mm.
Given the potential for a downturn, that's one thing I strongly encourage is really make sure you've got your numbers down and that you're confident with what you're presenting to your investors.
So, what's a way that you've recently improved your business that we could apply to ours?
That's a good question. I think it's really being responsive. And as an attorney, clients want answers right away. They've got investors that are asking for them. So just this year, we've implemented our system. We've moved to Amazon Web Services. So we're now cloud-based as a law firm. I can kind of hop on the computer wherever I am from a laptop, from even a different country, and I have the same essentially workstation that I do at work. And that really helps me respond to clients quicker and help them look better, because the quicker I can get them an answer, the quicker my sponsors, syndicators can get back to their investors, and then they in turn look good to their investors and really puts makes their reputation look even better, and the investors want to continue to invest with them and on future deals.
Amazon Web Services. Is that
Yes,
right?
sir.
And so is that like connecting to your desktop computer in your office and it's actually operating there and communicating back and forth, or is or it's just all in the cloud?
So I'm not going to lie, with my technical expertise, I don't 100% understand where it works, but I can tell you from how I do is I can log on at work where I have my computers, have my desktop, all of my programs. I can do the same thing from my laptop at home, and it'd be as I never left. I can have one
Wow.
document up, leave work, go home, pull up the laptop, documents there, ready to go.
Wow.
It just
Okay. I'll
it's
have to look into that.
it's made it so much easier to get to your content when you need it.
So what's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
That's another good question. I think putting the client, as an attorney, putting the client first. Really, I want to make my clients look good, and it goes back to, I think, the responsiveness is getting back to them quickly, getting answers quickly. If we don't know an answer, going and finding that answer for the client so that they're able to run their business, whether it's just a small investor, whether it's a syndicator, getting back to them quickly with organized answers so that they're able to not spend time devoted to only legal issues, but to actually get out there and run the business, which is their expertise.
And tell us how you like to give back.
I've got two little kids. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So lately, every day I think they come home and they've learned something new. And it's kind of amazing to see where they've learned this. I've never, listen, I've never taught them this. I've never taught them these words, or coming home and just learning that. So one of the things we do is I've trying to volunteer at his school, and as he grows older, I really want to make education a priority, and helping those that aren't able to access the kind of type of education that I'm hoping to give to him. So spending time and resources doing that. And from a firm, we're really bumping our pro bono, not just from the education standpoint, but being able to help those that need legal resources that may not be able to afford them.
Mm. Wow. Well, thank you for giving back in that way. And I appreciate you giving just in your time being on the show, Jeff, having an entity and when and where and what, all those things. I mean, it's so important and it can seem so complicated when you're first getting started. But I think, you need an entity, right? If you're going to buy real estate but sometimes we need somebody like yourself that can give us some guidance. And so, and on that fact, tell them how they can get in touch with you.
You can reach me by email at jlove@gibbsgiden.com. You can also feel free to check out our website. We'll have my contact information as well, and that's gibbsgiden.com.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.